Welcome back to our journey through Genesis as we progress on this series. Today we'll be diving into chapter 21, which brings us to the long-awaited fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham and Sarah, the birth of Isaac. This chapter also explores the separation of Hagar and Ishmael from Abraham's household, a moment filled with God's provision and compassion. Let's explore. Genesis 21 opens with the fulfillment of a promise that had been years in the making. At the age of 90, Sarah finally gives birth to a son, and Abraham, who is 100 years old, names him Isaac, which means laughter. This name reflects both the joy of his parents and the initial disbelief Sarah had when she first heard God's promise. The birth of Isaac is a testament to God's faithfulness. Despite their old age and the many years of waiting, God's promise to Abraham and Sarah is realized. This moment marks a new chapter in God's covenant with Abraham, as Isaac is the child through whom God's promises will be fulfilled. In obedience to God's command, Abraham circumcises Isaac on the 8th day. This act is significant because it reaffirms the covenant God established with Abraham back in Genesis 17. Circumcision serves as a sign of this covenant, a physical mark of belonging to God's chosen people. As Isaac grows, Abraham and Sarah celebrate his birth, and the joy of God's fulfilled promise spreads throughout their household. But as Isaac grows, tensions begin to rise within Abraham's household. During a celebration for Isaac's weaning, Sarah notices Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking Isaac. This act stirs up old resentments, and Sarah demands that Abraham send Hagar and her son away. Sarah's request is not just about the teasing, it reflects her fear that Ishmael, as the older son, might threaten Isaac's inheritance. Though this decision is painful for Abraham, God assures him that it is the right course of action, promising that Ishmael too will be made into a great nation. Abraham is deeply troubled, but God reassures him that Isaac is the child through whom his covenant will continue. God's promise to bless Ishmael allows Abraham to release Hagar and her son, knowing that they will not be abandoned. With a heavy heart, Abraham sends Hagar and Ishmael away. They wander in the desert of Beersheba until their water runs out. In desperation, Hagar places Ishmael under a bush and moves away, unable to watch her son die. In her darkest moment, God hears the cries of Ishmael and responds. An angel of God calls to Hagar from heaven, reassuring her not to be afraid and telling her that God has heard the boy's cries. The angel then promises Hagar that Ishmael will grow into a great nation. God opens Hagar's eyes and she sees a well of water. She rushes to draw water for her son, and they are both saved. This moment demonstrates God's compassion and provision, even for those outside the immediate covenant. God's promises extend to Ishmael, ensuring his survival and future. Genesis 21 tells us that Ishmael grows up to become a skilled archer and lives in the wilderness of Paran. Hagar finds a wife for him from Egypt, and his descendants will go on to form a great nation, just as God promised. God's care for Hagar and Ishmael is a reminder that his blessings and purposes are broader than we might imagine. Though Ishmael is not the child of the covenant, he is still part of God's plan, and God's promises to Abraham extend to him as well. The chapter concludes with a peaceful interaction between Abraham and Abimelech. Abimelech approaches Abraham to make a covenant, recognizing that God is with Abraham in everything he does. They agree to live in peace, and Abraham also settles a dispute over a well that his servants had dug, which Abimelech's servants had seized. Abraham offers sheep and cattle to Abimelech as part of their covenant, and the two men agree to live harmoniously. The well they settle over is named Beersheba, which means well of the oath, marking the place as a testimony to their agreement. This covenant reflects God's ongoing blessing over Abraham, securing peace and stability for his growing household. Genesis 21 is a chapter filled with fulfillment and new beginnings. The birth of Isaac is the fulfillment of God's long-standing promise to Abraham and Sarah, a testimony to God's faithfulness. Yet it is also a chapter that highlights God's compassion and provision for those like Hagar and Ishmael who find themselves on the margins. God's promises are sure, his care extends to all, and his plans are not limited to one line of descendants. The covenant with Abimelech and the peace at Beersheba further solidify Abraham's standing, showing that God's blessing upon Abraham is seen by others and leads to peace. Thank you for watching today's episode. This chapter reminds us of God's faithfulness to his promises, his compassion for those in need, and the beginning of new chapters for both Isaac and Ishmael. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for continuity. Until next time, may you find hope in God's promises and trust in His provision.